Hello and welcome to the inaugural episode of our currently unnamed podcast, brought to you by the UCP Strathcona-Sherwood Park Constituency Association. I'm your host, Katie, and I'm joined tonight by Seth Brown and Evan Logue. Our goal is simple: to dive into the issues that matter to the next generation of Albertans right here in Sherwood Park and across the province. Whether it's policy, community building, or the future of our party, we're here to make sure your youth voices aren't just heard, they're leading. Let's get into it. Okay, so we have some breaking news today on the federal politics side. Former Conservative Member of Parliament Matt Jeneroux has crossed the floor to join Mark Carney's Liberals. So Seth, Evan, do you guys have any immediate thoughts that come to mind about this topic?
Well, I guess I'll go first. What I'll say is Edmund Burke, who is the founder of Conservatism, and he had such a great influence on our Westminster system of parliament. His entire idea for democracy was that we would elect representatives because the people's will is kind of fable in a way. And it's better to find a very suitable person to represent the will of a community in the parliament. And that's why we have a representative democracy. So what I've been seeing in sort of classical conservative circles is floor crossings are good. They're infallible. They should be unregulated. But of course, you have to understand that we're not, this isn't 1867 anymore, is what I say to those people. Nowadays, we vote based on party. People don't really vote based on the local candidate. And so they voted 50%, over 50% of electors in Edmonton Riverbend elected Matt Jeneroux to be their conservative candidate in a potential conservative government. And now, with Jeneroux's floor crossing, the Liberals are set to win a majority because they have 168 before Jeneroux's crossing, of course, thanks to Mr. D'Entremont and Mr. Michael Ma. And then they have 2 seats up for by-election in Toronto, which are safe Liberal seats, very safe. And then they have the Terrebonne by-election in Quebec, which they're contesting against the Bloc Québécois because it got annulled by the Supreme Court. So if they win all of those elections, they will win a majority government, and we will have a serious problem until 2029. So I've been going on for a bit here, but my core takeaway is I think that if you cross the floor and you betray the trust of your constituents that they placed on you to be a conservative or to be a liberal or be NDP or whatever, you should have to face your voters. You should have to prove to your voters that you are still a capable MP, regardless of your party, in a by-election, if you want to represent a party that you weren't elected to represent.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point of just this idea of many people, when they're going to go vote in elections, they don't go and do research about the specific candidate who's running to be member of parliament. They don't even necessarily know much about them. They know the party, and they're going to vote according to the party. So it's when you're doing things like switching sides, it's people don't know that isn't what they voted for. Even if you are at the core still the same person that you were, that isn't necessarily what the people voted for. Evan, do you have any thoughts on this topic?
Yeah. So obviously, when you're elected on a conservative platform and you switch your platform, essentially, there should be a by-election. And I've met people who are angry about the other two and demanding that they get by-elections. So it's very frustrating when I couldn't imagine how frustrating it is for the people of these ridings when you elect a conservative on a conservative platform and then they just switch platforms. However, I think the biggest takeaway for me of this whole ordeal is Poilievre. There's obviously something not working on a conservative leadership level that 3 MPs have crossed the floor. And so during the leadership evaluation in Calgary, he got, 87%? Was it? And
yeah,
so
I'm not sure exactly.
84, I think.
It was ridiculously high. So what that tells me is within his own Conservative Party of Canada bubble, he's very popular. But for people outside of that bubble, there's not much confidence in him at all. Yeah. Obviously during the election, the people of his original riding did not have confidence in him, and he lost the election as well. So the people of Canada don't have much confidence in him. So there's obviously something going on with him directly that 3 MPs have decided to leave his party.
I mean, what I'll say on the Poilievre thing is he may have lost the election and he may have lost his own seat because of changing demographics in suburban Ottawa, but that is the highest vote share in the history of the modern Conservative Party. That's higher than Stephen Harper in 2011 when he won his majority. That Pierre Poilievre won, and he brought in the base. So I don't think that Poilievre is inherently bad, but I definitely think that he's past his expiration date, if you get what I mean. He started out really strong with the anti-Trudeau message, but now we have a completely different guy in charge of the Liberal Party, and Poilievre isn't really suited to that. You see that, we're all conservative. We like Poilievre, but to the average voter, you look at the polls and they really don't like him, which, we see as irrational. And it might not be because of his personality. I don't think he's really done anything personally bad. It's just his political style, that kind of populist firebrand image. It doesn't really resonate with Canadians. So I do think that this should spark some calls for change in Conservative leadership.
No, and I agree with that 100%. I remember thinking kind of in the platform that he's ran over the past couple of years, there isn't any substance to it. Like, I couldn't actually tell you what any of Poilievre's legislative desires are. I just know that he didn't like Justin Trudeau, and now he doesn't like Mark Carney.
Verb the noun.
Yeah. So I think that if, he wants the support of people, and I wonder if that attitude is reflected in his dealings with his members of parliament as well. Like, maybe they were receiving the same thing from him of just not seeing any substance. But I mean, that's just speculative. Evan?
Yes, on the point of I should probably lower my hand, that would be a great idea. Seth said that us as Conservatives like Poilievre. Now, I'm not going to come here and say I don't like him, but like if an election was held today, I would probably vote for him. But I remember during the election, when he was going against Carney, of course, watching that debate. And from the start to the end of the debate, my confidence in him dwindled drastically based off of how he presented his platform, especially with his prison platform, with the whole idea of people should have free strikes and then they're done. I thought that was insane. Our prison system isn't a baseball game, right? So I'm not saying like I'm against Poilievre. But I'm saying even as a Conservative in Alberta, my confidence in him is definitely not where it should be, where I want a leader should be.
Well, Evan, if I may, I don't really think that this is a problem of policy per se. I mean, I don't personally agree with a lot of his policy, but that's just because we come from different areas of the Conservative brand. But what I will say, 3 strikes and you're out, that's a very common sense policy in my view. It's simply saying we have most of crime in Canada's urban centers is committed by the same group of people who keep getting released by the broken bail system and the broken justice system. So the idea it's not really punitive per se. It's more so trying to protect the public by keeping repeat offenders in prison so they can't go back out on the streets and terrorize people. I think the problem with Pierre is just his rhetoric and his campaign style. When I remember I don't remember actually because I was 3 years old. Back in 2011, the Liberal leader was Michael Ignatieff, who was this sort of globalist guy who traveled all around the world, and he spent his time on American news. He got an education in France, I believe, and he spoke Parisian French. And the Conservatives, they ran these ads calling him out for being an elitist globalist who came back to Canada very recently, and they said, Michael Ignatieff, he didn't come back for you. No, Mark Carney is also an elitist globalist. He's even personally owned up to that. He's traveled all across the world. We gave him a job with the Bank of Canada, and he decided, I don't want to do this, and he moved all the way to England. So we should have run the exact same strategy. We should have said, Mark Carney, he didn't come back for you. But Pierre Poilievre's campaign strategy was carbon tax Carney, which did not resonate with voters. It was seen as aggressive, while Carney is seen as the great negotiator and the moderate. I think that Steve Outhouse might be the change that we need. But I think that his messaging is just the problem here.
Okay, and I think the one other angle that I kind of have for this topic is, so Matt Jeneroux was the member of parliament for Edmonton Riverbend, and now we've lost a Conservative member of parliament. So what does this mean for conservatism in Edmonton? Because I know that definitely from a UCP perspective on the provincial level, it's like we're not getting Conservatives in Edmonton. We're not getting that representation in this region of the province. So to be losing that on the federal level as well, I think is concerning. And I'm not sure how well that represents the needs of the people, but But yeah, what do we think that this means for the city of Edmonton?
I guess if Evan's not going to go, I guess I'll go. You know, the Riverbend area, it's kind of, I believe, the most conservative part of Edmonton. In 2019, Casey Madhu, he was the MLA for that area. He lost his seat in 2023, but I think that we're never going to really find much success in Edmonton. We can win seats in the greater Edmonton area, like my riding of Sherwood Park. I think we can probably win in 2023, or not 2023, 2027. But the only reason that we won that Riverbend area in 2019 was because of the Alberta Party splitting the vote with the NDP. It's just not a very friendly area to the UCP, and I think that to change our image in Edmonton, we're going to have to go back to the progressive, conservative, quote-unquote, values of the time, which aren't really the best or what Alberta needs right now. I think that we shouldn't really look to Edmonton as a strategy. Our vote bank is Calgary and then suburban Edmonton.
Evan, do you have any thoughts on this?
I agree with Seth about the whole, you know, Edmonton's a lost cause for Conservatives. That's just a fact, whether it be provincial or federal. I remember trying to do that Strathcona Edmonton by-election, and there was no effort being done by the Conservatives in that riding because they knew Darby was going to lose to Nenshi. There was no chance. He won by a landslide too. And so when a Conservative loses that seat federally, I don't think there's much we can do. It means that Carney gets a majority. That's what it means. But there's nothing we can do about it.
So do either of you think that if we were to have a different leader, like do you think that there's a reality in this country where we could have a leader that would be able to appeal to both like the more progressive? Because the thing is, if we can't win with the progressives in Edmonton, like we have no chance of winning the progressives and progressive Conservatives in Ontario or in Quebec, right? So is this just a thing generally that we don't see possible for the federal Conservative Party, or do you think that there is a potential strategy? Because I mean, like, Edmonton is pretty more progressive, but it's still in Alberta, and I think that if we're giving up on Edmonton, I do fear for provinces like Ontario and Quebec of actually getting to those, like, you know, getting into Ottawa or Toronto. Like, we can't get Edmonton, we'd never get in there, right, on a federal level.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
don't
what
know.
I'll say to that is, I forgot to mention that, but I think that Edmonton isn't a lost cause federally, and I don't think it ever will be, because there's a lot of voters in Alberta who vote for the NDP provincially and then the Conservatives federally. If you look at the poll-by-poll map for Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan, the federal riding, it's all Conservative. And then you look at the Sherwood Park riding provincially, it's all NDP. So as long as we have those regionalist issues that Alberta has with the federal government, I think Edmonton will still be at least a competitive constituency for the Conservatives. Maybe Carney will try to build bridges, but I don't see him doing that. He's a flip-flopper. What I will say to the thing of bringing in progressive Conservatives is, I think we should be looking to a different kind of progressive Conservatives, and that's the 26% of Canadian voters who are fiscally progressive and socially conservative. I think that the progressive Conservative electorate is becoming the socially progressive, fiscally conservative electorate is becoming a lost cause. You have to abandon all of your values really to appeal to them, because at the end of the day, they're just liberals masquerading as conservatives, many of them. If you go on Twitter, you see a lot of them spew their spiel about how Poilievre is evil because he supported the truckers and whatnot. And the progressive Conservatives in Ontario especially are, I think, really, they shouldn't even be considered a part of our conservative movement in a way, because Doug Ford, he's built this political machine off of ethnic pandering and trying to build bridges and vote banks by dividing Canadians and segregating them along these ethno-cultural lines, which is just wrong, and that's anti-conservative. I think we should be focused on running a conservative campaign and bringing in people who do support our conservative values, such as unity.
Yeah,
My turn?
no, I think that that's very interesting. Yes.
Oh, lovely. I would also like to backtrack because I feel bad for saying Edmonton's a lost cause. I'm sorry, Edmonton.
enough.
I love you, Edmonton. No matter how many homeless people walk out onto the road while I'm driving. I wouldn't say I really have to. That sounds so bad. Edmonton isn't a lost cause. My point I was trying to make is that we don't try. We're not
For sure.
trying.
Yeah.
And that's my
Yeah.
problem.
That's not the target the target demographic for it. No, that's definitely true. And I have noticed that as well in a lot of campaigning is we just accept the fact that Edmonton is a harder region to win, but it just makes me wonder, what could we do to appeal to that area, because it wasn't always that way. Like even in the 2019, if we go back speaking federally, I think there was only 1 or 2 constituencies in Edmonton that weren't conservative. So this wasn't even that
I
long
think it was
ago.
just Edmonton
Or just,
Strathcona, actually.
yeah,
Heather
right, or
McPherson's
just
riding it.
one.
That's
Yeah.
just because you have the wealthy university area.
Yes, for sure. And I do think that is at times that is the downfall, what's happening in Edmonton. So yeah, it just made me curious of like there has to be a strategy to appeal to these less rural conservatives that I think doesn't just apply in Edmonton, but applies cross country if we ever want to have a conservative federal government.
I think
Yeah.
it's dialogue. I think that's a strategy. Evan, if you wanted to go ahead.
Yeah, I still wanted to comment on the leadership part of the
Mhm.
question that
Mhm.
was
Yeah.
asked that I haven't actually answered. If there is, like when you say more progressive, it's very
Mhm.
hard to imagine in the current state.
Mhm.
Because even then, when I look at Poilievre, I don't see him as that not progressive. Like he's still, to me, compared to
Mhm.
other conservatives I've seen, he's still pretty progressive. So if there's
Mhm.
someone who fits the progressive bill more, I haven't seen him. But to comment on Seth with the 26 fiscally conservative, socially, wait, no, other way around. Reverse that. I'd argue that people nowadays are much more socially liberal. Like we've come a long way in the last 50 years. I had to look it up because I am not that good with numbers. Roughly 75% of Canadians believe in gay marriage now. So you can take that as you will, as a like if that's liberally, socially liberal. But I think we are moving towards a more socially liberal society. So I think the best candidate, if we are to choose a new conservative candidate, would have to be still the same amount economically conservative, but more socially liberal. Personally,
I disagree. Because the thing is, right, we've been going on this progressive left direction as a society for so long. We were one of the first countries in the world to legalize gay marriage and all that, and we've had legal abortion since the 60s, and these have all become really toxic issues. But I think we're really hitting the fence when it comes to social liberalism, where people have started to become fed up. You have, the issue of transgender kids. A majority of Canadians in every single province oppose the idea of transing kids. You have the DRIPA debate going on in British Columbia, which has soured the progressive view on Indigenous rights and whatnot. You have the medical assistance in dying issue. Recently, a 26-year-old with mental health problems was given medical assistance in dying. When people see these, they do not like the direction that their country is going in. So I think that we are hitting our limit on liberalism, and we have people who are saying now is the time to conserve our current social order.
hold on. Should I speak? I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So with that though, I'd ask, when we hit a fence, does that mean we start walking backwards? So just because we've hit a point where, we feel pretty good about our social justice and our social issues, doesn't mean we start backtracking them. And so that's why I'm talking about a leader that does not, push harder, but one that maintains the level that we are at now that I feel comfortable with most issues. There's obviously issues that are still pretty major, like you said, medical assisted dying is pretty bad. I don't want to talk about the trans people more, but I do find it funny that you said transing kids. I don't know what that means. Transing kids. But yeah, not a topic that we should get into right now. But
the simple way of saying it.
But yeah,
I'm just pushing them into making them believe that they're born in the wrong body, that kind of thing.
The one thing I will say is that when we're thinking of like what does a political party believe and what should it stand for, I don't think that you can really go and say that if you have a conservative party, at least from my understanding of it as I'm thinking about it, like I don't think that you can necessarily say it should be socially conservative and fiscally liberal or fiscally conservative and socially liberal. Like, I think that there has to be a middle ground in those areas of you can't go to extremes on either side. You should have a combination of fiscal conservatism and social conservatism, because as a conservative voter, I probably do lean more towards social liberalism and fiscal conservatism, but I still expect a level of conservatism in both aspects from the party. So I feel like, and it's also like, I guess you have to ask yourself the question of, are you trying to appeal to as many people as possible in order to win an election, or are you trying to stand on specific principles? I guess is also a question to have in that regard.
I guess maybe I
But
feel this way just because I represent the progressive, fiscally progressive red Tory faction of our conservative movement. But I feel like there's a large constituency here that we don't really appeal to because we're too busy saying, axe the budget, axe the taxes, axe this, axe that, cut this, cut that, destroy all the social services because everyone can do things on their own. And there's conservatives who believe that pull yourself up by your bootstraps doesn't really work. Having that be I guess I'll go on a bit of a tangent here. Back in 2004, when the progressive conservatives and the reform merged, Joe Clark, who was a former progressive conservative leader, former prime minister, and MP at the time, he said that the merger would result in a reform takeover. And he was right, I believe. I think that the fiscal conservative, social conservative reform party ideology has become the dominant force in our conservative movement. And in turn, you have a large constituency of people with differing views within that broad conservative range who don't feel represented, and so they don't show up to the polls. Again, 26% of the electorate is really big. So at least some appeals to them. I think Pierre has been trying that recently. He endorsed the GST debate, the GST rebate, which was good. You can't push people away by accepting this status quo tyranny by the majority, I believe.
well, yeah, no, I definitely think that is a very good point to consider. Do you guys have any last comments on Matt Jeneroux crossing the floor? If not, I have another topic that we can move on to discuss.
Yeah, we should probably go on to another topic. Right.
I think we should invoke the Emergencies Act and freeze his bank account. No, joking.
Okay, let's
Well, the next topic that I kind of thought would be very interesting to discuss is the government of Alberta announced on Friday that they've invested $143 million to establish 476 complexity teams in K-6 schools across the province, which include 1 teacher and 2 educational assistants. So I was wondering if you guys have any thoughts on this specific topic.
This is my idea that I brought up, and I didn't research it at all. So I have so many questions about this that I have very little answers to.
Okay.
Like, what do these teams look like? Because they have data already put out.
Right.
And what I'm thinking is I haven't seen a single team at my school. I don't know if Seth has, but I haven't seen a team. Who are these teams and how do they...
SWAT.
Okay.
So I have a quote from an article that I found from Red Deer News. And it says that these teams will help identify oh my goodness, I'm gonna try that again. These teams will help identify student needs clearly, support learners with diverse challenges, and provide in-class assistance to teachers. So it sounds like this is going to be people who go in alongside the teachers to help students who are specifically struggling. And I will say one thing that I've noticed. So this year I've been tutoring and working at homework clubs along with immigrant children from Somalia who have immigrated to Canada, and they don't speak English as a first language. So these kids are intelligent, capable, but because they don't speak English, they're barely able to understand what their teachers are teaching them, and they're causing them to fall behind in class. So I don't know a lot about this topic, but if this is a situation where those teachers would be able to work one-on-one with those students who are struggling in class and help them work on the things that they need to work on so that they can succeed without isolating these students and still allowing them to be in classes with the rest of their peer group, I think this will be a really good thing. But that, of course, depends on whether or not it actually works out in that way.
What I'll say is I think I'm very proud of what we've done, what Minister Nicolaitis has done. on the education front. I think that this investment is a good opportunity to improve our education system. I think that the issue of children in classrooms not being able to speak English is really a fault of our federal immigration system. You know, we want to be compassionate, and we do need to be compassionate, and we need to understand that there's a lot of people in the world right now who don't have the same opportunities that Canadians enjoy. But we're just setting these immigrants up for failure if we let them enter the country and they can't speak a language that is spoken here. So I think it's good that we're also lobbying to have provincial control over immigration, so we can start to say, you can't come into our country if you can't talk to people. You know, there's practical problems, there's social cohesion related problems with that. I think that with the immigrants we have now, of course, we have to help them as much as we can. I think that if we could have a way to teach them outside of school time, teach them English on the side, in addition to the English curriculum that they already learn in school. We could do that through public-private partnerships. I think that would be a good way to help them get ahead, and so they're not held back a grade.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do understand that. I've thought a lot about that specific issue over the past couple of months, and I think that I do think that this is a good response to this problem, because a lot of these kids, I mean, I agree it was a problem with our federal immigration policy, but that acknowledging that doesn't change the reality of the situation, which is that these kids are here, they're trying to learn, and that they do need help. And as great as it would be to be able to do something, you know, out of school time, it's just not realistic. A lot of these parents, they don't drive, they don't have the means to get their kids places where they need to be. They have lots of kids. So I think that, you know, as a response from the provincial government, especially considering everything that happened with the teachers' strike, because if we remember, that was one of the problems that the teachers really hit on the head with the hammer, was that the classrooms are complex and the children have complex needs now. And I do think that while that's not the only complex need, that's an aspect of it. And I do think, like, I like this as a response to this situation, to try to be realistic and just be like, this is what's happening and this is a way that we can respond to this. But Evan, do you have any thoughts on this?
I do have a question for you, Katie, because you said these kids are from Somalia. So when you
Yes.
say immigrant, like, do they immigrate or are they refugee status? That's the question I have.
That's fair. I actually don't know specifically. From what I understand, they've immigrated here, but I'm not 100% sure.
Because Somalia
specifically
is not the nicest place in the world.
No, for sure it isn't. But yeah, I don't know if they're refugees, because I know some of the kids that I've worked with, they've come first with their parents, and then a couple years later their siblings have come and stuff. So there's like varying levels of like family reunion and stuff.
But I also think, on the topic of refugees, I think that also gives a new aspect to these complexity teams. Because when Seth says that some people don't speak English as a failure of our immigration policy, well, I feel like refugees are exempt to that, you know, consideration, seeing as if they had a choice, I don't think they would be here in the first place. They're here for safety. Right. So the fact that they don't speak English is more of, they were hurried here.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, actually, what I think about that actually raises an idea I've had for a while. Immigration in Canada nowadays, it's a very individualistic thing. It's kind of, you're on your own. You come to Canada on your own, and then you're released into Canada on your own with your own money. I think you're required to bring $10,000, might be more now, to pay for your own living expenses. And then the government tells you, get your own job. I think that immigration should be more of a group thing. So especially with refugees, right? Because refugees haven't really had a lot of time to adjust to what Canada is like, because they're uprooted from their own countries and brought here by circumstance. And that means that they might not be well adjusted to living in what we call a multicultural society. So I think that if we have, especially refugees, come in groups and they spend their first, say, maybe 6 months in Canada, they're in a group and they have to go to these orientation classes where they learn things about Canada, and they learn English, they learn a bit of French maybe, and they're encouraged to learn from each other's cultures and values as well and get to know each other. I think that would really help with the integration process, especially for refugees.
But yeah, I think the complexity teams would still help refugees. And like you said, when they... Nope, I lost it. Never mind. But I just wanted to finish what I wanted to say about the complexity teams, is that I want to see these teams in my school. I don't know if that sounds weird, but like I'm being told, like I look at the analysis that they did, and they got like thousands of classrooms done, yet I haven't seen them. So my question is, where are they?
I think they're
Okay,
doing
so
elementary schools first.
I have here from, yeah, it looked like it said K to 6 in this article.
Yeah.
And then because this is a Red Deer News article, it says Red Deer Public Schools will get 11 teams. Red Deer Catholic Regional Schools will get 9. Chinook's Edge School Division will get 2. Clearview Public School will get 1. So it looks like this is obviously biased towards southern school divisions, but we could maybe look up what it looks like for the whole province.
Have you guys seen the analysis they got so far?
No.
I haven't.
It is. I looked at it in
Okay.
Elk Island Public Schools,
Yeah.
and the more rural school divisions have very
Yeah.
low complexity. Calgary and
Okay.
Edmonton, however, have a ridiculous high complexity number, like in the thousands. While so like if you look at the chart, it's each district is split into low complexity, I think medium complexity, and high complexity. Rural school districts are higher weighted on the low complexity, while the cities are heavily leaning towards the high complexity and the medium complexity. So actually, can I ask a question to you guys? Am I allowed to do that?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I want to know what you
absolutely.
guys think that means when our urban areas seem to have a higher amount of kids who have high complexity classrooms.
So I guess if I can ask you a question back, what does complexity mean? Like, what does that look like for kids? Like, what kind of needs is that addressing? Is this like learning challenges, like learning disabilities? Like, do you know specifically? I genuinely don't know.
I think
I
I
actually
can
don't.
answer that. They're looking at it's a lot of factors. They're looking at the student to teacher ratio. They're looking also at how many students in the classroom have special needs, how many students have behavioral issues, how many students can't speak English. And that might be weighted based on the grade. I'm not sure, because I think that it'd be more complex with a younger grade group. What I think is this all ties back to immigration, I believe, and I'd like to make it very clear this is a problem with the immigration system and not immigrants themselves. There's immigrants who come to our country are hardworking people who really appreciate the opportunities that we've given them. It's a failure of our government completely to help them integrate into Canadian society. So urban centers, immigrants, they don't really settle into rural areas. They all settle into urban centers. And so that's why it's rapid population growth in urban centers resulting in higher numbers of students in classrooms.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say as well. It's just like if you consider people, just the population disparity between Edmonton and Sherwood Park as well. It's like just talking to my friends who went to school in Edmonton, they had upwards of 50 people in their classes. Where I mean, as a specifically French immersion student too, I mean, the most students that I ever had in a class was probably like 20 in my English class in high school. So it's like even that totally that would complicate a teacher, and then the role that the teacher has is just if they have double the amount of students in a class. So I do think that that is probably a big part of the problem and part of the difference between what they're seeing in urban and rural areas is population. Like there are some schools, like I know out in Stony Plain, there's a school that's called Blueberry School where they probably have 6 or 7, kids in a class. So it's like they're going to have much different, even just ratios of needs than they would in any of the schools in Edmonton.
I'm just trying to fact check myself here. I'm trying to find the article itself.
Yeah, of
You
course.
guys have a little chat while I try to find this data.
Yeah, for sure. I guess the other question, and Evan, don't worry, we'll come back to you so that you can share your thought. But I guess the other thing that I'm considering is like as a response to the teacher strike, which happened earlier this year, like do we think that this is a good response? Do we think this is something that will help the teachers and help satisfy those concerns that they were talking about?
I feel like it won't satisfy the teachers' union because I think that unions have a very important place in our society to defend workers' rights, but unions in Canada have become very politicized, and the Alberta Teachers Association is no different. They're very clearly aligned with the NDP, not formally, but de facto. So I think that they've always really had a partisan goal in mind. There's real concerns, but they tried to negotiate for a deal that was really, really unreasonable, unsustainable, given our current fiscal situation where we have a deficit caused by declining oil prices. So they weren't willing to negotiate in good faith, and they accused the government of not being willing to negotiate in good faith. I think that this is the best solution that we could have. Same with legislating the contract instead of doing binding arbitration like what the teachers are asking for. You know, as a high school student, I missed an entire month of school just with the government trying to work out a deal without having to legislate it. And if the government had been more lenient, I could have missed an entire semester of school, which would be really bad. And you have to think about the kids as well who don't have many credits, who maybe fell behind in grade 10. They are really going to be hurt. They would have been really hurt by a long teacher's strike. This was the best measure that we could have given very unfortunate circumstances. I just wish that we would have a culture between our government and our unions that's more of mutual understanding. There's a reputation with Conservatives that we're the anti-union party, which is not true. I think that we respect the role of unions in society. It's just a lot of partisan politics got into the waters and muddied them.
For sure. Evan, have you found your data yet?
Have found a bunch of data. This
Okay.
wasn't the one I was looking at. Oh wait, no, this might be. Yes, this is it. Hold on.
Okay.
Let me see if I can
Okay.
share my screen.
Yeah. Okay, yes.
Hold on. Shoot, I have so many tabs open. Which one am I trying to share? This one. Here we go. It's Edmonton Journal.
Cool. Okay.
Oh,
Yep.
The dark blue is low complexity, and the light blue is high complexity. So you see here, I don't know if you guys can see my mouse.
Yep.
Elk Island School Division has more, it leans towards low complexity, while places like Calgary have a high amount of high complexity classrooms.
This is actually interesting. Calgary has higher high complexity than Edmonton.
Very high. Very high.
I didn't expect
and
that.
then down here, it says Alberta class size K to 12. So, do I know what this means? I haven't registered it fully yet. Let me just... Do you guys understand this? I haven't registered it in my head.
The bar charts are organized by grade. Not...
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously, so grade 7 to...
Yes, yeah.
So it's pretty low, actually, class sizes.
Yeah.
No? They're actually not as, like, because these ones are all that high.
Okay, so it's grades, so... The different colors are grades, and then the complexity based on the class sizes. So on the left, it has the numbers, the number of students. The colors are the grades, and then so it's just class sizes.
So yeah, things seem to be the class sizes seem to be moderate to low.
Where
in most
are they
places,
putting 25,000 students in a classroom?
I think that's pretty broad. But yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
So it's actually better than I thought it was.
I never knew it was this bad. Wow.
I don't know how much we can trust the Edmonton Journal, but we're trusting it.
I guess I'd have to look more into, because that was a very good question that you asked, Evan. I guess I'd have to look more into the specifics of why. In the urban areas, it would be more
I wonder
complex,
if it's
but
because it's a higher population of students. So
that's what
perhaps more problematic children are affecting each other, so it like spreads. I wonder if that might be the issue.
Or just density, just more people, so you're more likely to have.
Or
I
maybe
think
it's a
I'd chalk it up
community
to
issue.
immigration, personally.
Yeah.
Maybe it's like a community issue where, perhaps the community is not pulling for the kids as they should be.
Yeah.
Anyways, what were you guys talking about that I totally missed out on? How do
you feel these complex classroom teams, how do you feel they are as a response to the requests from the teachers during the strike? Like, do you think that these complex teams satiate the problems that the teachers were talking about?
I guess I'd have to wait for the data to see what comes out of it. Because, the response is only as good as what it affects. So if the effects are positive, then I think it's a great response. If it does absolutely nothing, then I think it was a crappy response. But on top of the, $12 billion that we basically said we were going to put towards the education system, I think it's a nice little bonus for the teachers.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Does anyone have any other topics they'd like to discuss? Or
I
should
was
we wrap
thinking
it up?
maybe the progressive Tory party, or I guess they're now just called the Tory party, they've kind of started getting serious, relatively so. My personal view on the Tory party is that it's a movement. I think they held their convention maybe. Peter Guthrie, he had an event where he gave a speech, and I looked in the audience and I saw there was literally nobody there who was maybe under the age of 50. So I feel like what they've created is a movement that's entirely based on people who are concerned about their pension security, which is not exactly a good movement that you want to build.
Yeah, I'm not actually personally very familiar with this topic, but I do know kind of just broadly talking to a lot of people who are up in that, 50 and above age ranges. People
Yeah.
are legitimately very threatened by the idea that
Yeah.
they might not have their pension in the way that they always anticipated that they would. And I know, like, talking to one of my friend's moms, she's ready to leave Alberta if anything happens to her pension. So I do think that, like, maybe it's harder for us to understand this
Yeah.
aspect because we're younger, but I do think that this is legitimately something that is concerning people and is pushing them to decide how they vote. And I just think that that's an interesting. I don't think that means that there
Yeah.
isn't anything wrong with the pension, but yeah, I just
I
do
mean,
think that
I'm
it's
personally an opponent of the Alberta pension plan idea that the UCP has got going on. Doesn't mean that I'm going to join the Progressive Tory party or anything. Absolutely not. But so there are valid concerns, but the problem is that's the movement that Guthrie has built. It's really like in a way, a single issue party, but it's really a single issue party in terms of pension security. It's become, and you see that reflected, I believe, in their take on Alberta federalism and Alberta separation, right? They oppose separation, which is a fine position to take, but they don't ever have any concrete solutions about the separatists. And they don't want to say, hey, these people, they have real problems. Let's start talking about them. Let's start talking about what the federal government's been doing to Alberta oil. They don't want to talk about that. They just want to say separatists are evil, and that's not it's not how you solve the debate.
Yeah, I think the whole progressive party becoming a thing, I think it's just a response to this separatism. Because as a progressive myself, I kind of live in a state of worry with the United Conservative Party, because this is a positive thing for Danielle Smith. I noticed at the AGM, when people vote on something, she tries her best to follow through on it. And that's amazing for her. But now my worry will always be, what will people ask her to do? Because if perhaps something gets voted on that, I'm not a big fan on it, that concerns me. So I think that's why the Progressive Conservative Party, or I don't know, what are we calling them?
Their
What
logo
are
just
they?
says Tory Party. I think that works a lot better than the mouthful.
I think the Tory Party is just a bunch of, this sounds wrong to say, but they're scared progressives. They're scared of what the separatists are going to do to the UCP. And as a response, they've created their own party to combat it. It's like, and I feel awful for Danielle because she's getting pulled on both sides. I don't know how she could even, handle this. This would be awful. I actually just I put her on my wall today. I found an old newspaper and it was like they had a photo of her, but it was a good photo. You never see that in the news. They never use good photos of her. They like to get the worst moments of her. But this one was a good photo, and I liked it so much I put it on my wall. But yeah, I wouldn't worry about the progressives too much.
No, and I think you're totally right. It's a very good point. A very similar thing happened actually during COVID in the opposite way, where in response to Jason Kenney and the things that he was doing, there were these different parties that were created. The original Alberta separation party that I remember seeing in probably like 2021 was the Wexit party. Yeah. And I remember that, which was in a response to what was happening in Alberta during COVID. So it's like these are very natural. You're right. It's a natural response when you feel threatened to want to create a party to combat that. But yeah,
I think
for
that
sure.
they should exercise foresight because, Maxime Bernier and his People's Party of Canada, they come from the exact opposite side of that conservative spectrum, but they do the same thing. They got 2% of the vote in the last election, and they cost us like 3 seats, the federal Conservatives. So my fear is that what the Progressive Tory Party is going to do is they're going to cost us a lot of close seats in urban areas. They might even cost us my own riding, and they could even usher in a NDP government just by the vote split alone. I don't think that's likely, but if that does happen, that'll just accelerate separatist sentiment and defeat their entire point. So I think they should just look through the foresight. There's a reason that we're a big tent.
That's true.
Yeah. And you have a good point where they, like I said, I'm just as scared as they are with where some things are going. But I recognize that Danielle's not perfect. If you have to, you're not going to agree with your politician 100%. You agree with them on most things. So there's been times where I've been dissatisfied with Danielle's decision. But at the end of the day, I don't go and switch parties because I know that in most cases, she is going to make the right decision for me. And so I hope that progressive conservatives, realize that just because they do something that you don't agree with, and you can express your right by protesting or speaking out, but it's probably the best candidate we have. Danielle is probably the best candidate we'll have for a very long time. So I think we need to just have our trust with the UCP.
I completely agree. For example, as someone who is pro-life, I disagree with Danielle Smith's pro-choice stance, but I'm not going to go and form my own splinter party about that, because the thing is, even though Danielle doesn't share my position, she has appointed ministers who do. Adriana LaGrange is a prominent pro-life activist. So we're a big tent.
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree 100%. I mean, I think it's only logical to see that splintering division, which seems to be very within the essence of conservatism in Alberta. It seems like we like to break up and split each other up and be the opposite of united conservatives. But if we want to be effective, like, it only makes sense that if we want to be effective, if we want to form government and we want to win against the NDP, we have to stay together and we have to be able to respect differing opinions that exist within our party.
Absolutely.
Which I honestly think is a pretty cool aspect of this podcast that we have here. It's like, even just the three of us, we're different people, we live different lives, but sometimes we have different opinions on things and sometimes we have the same opinions on things, but we're all able to respect those opinions. It's pretty cool.
Gotta have faith in the party.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. There's a good quote from Diefenbaker, which I can't remember, but if I do find it, there are, in essence, he said, there are stupid people in my party who get excited when we fail at the polls. My job was to make the Conservative Party work for the average person.
Yeah, totally. Okay, well, does anyone have any last comments on any of the things that we discussed so far today?
I think we're good.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in. We're proud to bring you these perspectives from the UCP Strathcona-Sherwood Park Constituency Association. Don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on what's happening in our community. I'm Katie, and on behalf of the Youth Committee, thanks for being part of the movement.